morning, church. Morning. I want to bring you greetings from the not so far distance Pennsylvania Conference. It's all of about 10 minutes to get here this morning, so we all live in the same vicinity, I would assume. And I see some people here from Pennsylvania Conference. I bring greetings from Pastor Gary Gibbs, his wife and family, also from Carlos Charnichart and his family, and Pastor Will and Arlene. So good to see you. I hope you're still enjoying your vacation. It's over on Monday. Just teasing. You know, that children's story this morning was a beautiful enactment of the scripture that comes from 2 Chronicles 20:20. Used to be in the field of eye care, and I always liked to make people see perfect 20/20 vision. It was rewarding to me, and their smiles was just amazingly rewarding. The translation that I have is slightly different, but let me just read to you. It's just what you heard in the children's story. Right, it says, "Believe in the Lord your God." Can you believe in him? Are his promises sure? Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm here to tell you this morning why I believe in him. And then it says, "And you will be established." Established is like with the children of Israel, where they were established in the land. They could build a house with a foundation and everything. They're established there because they're believing in God. They went through that water to get there twice. But they were there. They believed that. They put their foot in the water and the waters parted. Believe him and you'll be established. Believe his prophets. Believe his prophets. And you will, my translation says, succeed. The title of the sermon today is the RX, or prescription for prosperity. It's God's word, and you can trust it. And I'm going to tell you why I trust it this morning. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, sister church, not too far from here. You may have heard of the old, well, some of you are not old enough. Probably won't remember the Hatboro Church, right? It's called Bucks County now. That's where I went as a youngster, and I enjoyed going there. I was raised, as I said, as an Adventist. I also was baptized, but I couldn't be baptized at the Hatboro Church. Why? We didn't have a baptistry back in those days. I go way back. So I went to Chestnut Hill Church. They had a baptistry there. You still call it Chestnut Hill, I think. Philadelphia? Okay, went there. And I can remember coming back as maybe a 9-year-old, 10-year-old when I was baptized. And it was a fall day, and it was cold outside. My hair was still wet. I got in the car. My father was driving. And as I looked out that window next to me, it had gotten all fogged up. And as it got all fogged up, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Good. That window got all foggy. I looked up through that window because I looked, Lord. I looked up and said, "Lord, from this day forward, I will never sin again." Now you're giggling because you know why. I was saying the same thing the children of Israel said when they heard the 10 Commandments being spoken by the mouth of God. He said, all that the Lord has said, we will do it. We're going to obey. If only it was that simple. It is simple, but it's not the way we just said. Trying it in your own strength is a prescription for disaster. And I was on the road to disaster. Matter of fact, when I was sitting in one of the churches, not too far from here, it was either Allentown or Bethlehem. I was visiting from Bucks County, going up there, a week off, and do you know the difference between preaching and meddling? Well, this pastor got into what I thought was meddling. I don't even remember his name anymore. But here's what he said on a stewardship type sermon. He said, you really ought to pay tithe on the gross income before you take out federal tax, state tax, local tax, township tax, social security tax. You get it? A lot of taxes. He said he should pay it on the gross. Well, now the hair on the back of my neck started to stand up, and I got a little bit irritated. Now, you've heard of the Great Controversy, right? The book, but it's more than just a book. It's the war that goes on for the territory between my two fingers and yours if you put them up to your temples. There's a war or a controversy between good and evil. So if anything I say today irritates you, and you think it's into meddling, please look it up. Please pray about it, because you can take anything to God in prayer, anything. He's big enough to handle it. So I was sure he was into meddling, and I said, this isn't right. And I know it's not right because I've got the proof that it's not right. You ready for my proof? Mighty quiet here. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a country called England, and it still exists. And it had a high tax rate. Does anybody know what the upper tax tier was back then? I'll give you a hint. 90%. Now, I said, all right, let's just use this example. And I took this to the Lord in prayer. I said, Lord, here's the example. If I earn $1 million a year, and I have to pay 90% tax, that's how much, you mathematicians? $900,000. Now, the scripture says that for tithe, heard it this morning also, said it's only 10%. How much is that? 100,000. So if I turn tithe 100,000 and 900,000 to the government, how much do I have left to live on? And I was smug. I said, Lord, there it is. I'm so glad that God hears our prayers and answers. I believe he answered me in that prayer because instantaneously a question flashed through my mind, and it was so strong I couldn't help but answer it. And the question was, Al, where do you live? Well, I live in the United States. Oh my, that's not the same as England, is it? Our tax rate was high back then. I think it was, the upper tier may have been 60% or 70% in the United States back then. You can look it up in your ancient history. But I said, all right, Lord. I was convicted because I was bothered in the pew, and I said, well, I'm going to take this to God, and I don't think I have to. I don't think I can. So my promise to him was, before I get off my knees, I said, Lord, I will return a tithe on the gross until I go bankrupt. Amen? I didn't want to go bankrupt, but I was willing to do what he wanted me to do, and I made a commitment to him. Now here's a little story, true story. My wife can back it up. I even have the old records to show you, with all the redactions, you know what redactions are. You take out the social security number and all that. Do you want to know what he did to my income that next year when I made that commitment? About About 5%? Somebody say doubled? Who said that? Do you live in my house? In 1 year, he doubled my income. And I looked up and said, how did you do that? 2 Chronicles 20:20, the prescription for prosperity. Now don't, in my opinion, don't try this to get rich. This is something between you and God, this tithing and these offerings. We should do it because God loves a not a constrained giver, right? And if you feel like, oh, I don't want to part with this, but I want to get rich, I don't believe that's the right way. So there's the story. He doubled my income. Now I'm going to read, but before I do this, we have some prophets in the scriptures. Do we have a prophetess to this church? Ellen G. White, I heard. Any of you ever read any of her books? Yes. Testimonies? Praise the Lord. Good. But I'm going to be pretty certain that there's some of you here today who were like I was years ago, hadn't really read much of her writings. So please don't be offended. Please don't get angry. Read it and check it out. God only wants what's best for his children. Is that correct? Yes. So here's the first thing I wanted to share with you. This is from Patriarchs and Prophets, a little series of books called the Conflict of the Ages series. And it's from page 753.1. If you don't want to write all these down, you don't have to. We'll be giving some of these out tomorrow. We have a seminar tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning talking about plan-giving instruments. And then Bonnie has some appointment times that you can sign up for on the sign-up sheet to meet with Pennsylvania licensed attorney to discuss estate planning issues for 30 minutes, one-on-one, in privacy. So please take advantage of it. Here's the quote, page 753, first paragraph. All. How much? All that man receives of God's bounty still belongs to God. Yes. Whatever God has bestowed in the valuable and beautiful things of earth is placed in the hands of man to test them. Money, blessings placed in our hands as a test. Well, I've taken enough tests in my time, I'd like to prepare before a test. So here comes some of the preparation so that you can pass the test with flying colors. Why does he test them with this? To sound the depths of their love for him and their appreciation of his favors. Whether it be the treasuries of wealth, that's only one treasure, or intellect, they're to be laid a willing offering at the feet of Jesus. The giver saying, meanwhile, with David, all things come of thee, and of your own we've given to you. Here's something from the Red Books. Ever heard of testimonies to the church? All right, this is from the Fourth Testimonies, page 391, first paragraph. This one ought to get your attention. Everybody should be awake. Many are going directly contrary to the light which God has given to his people. Who are his people? How many of us? All right, but how many? She says, many are going directly contrary to the light which God has given to his people. Because, why? They do not read the books which contain the light and knowledge and cautions, reproofs and warnings. I'm not being critical. I was there. This was me. That's why I got so angry when I heard that you ought to pay tithe on the gross. So what is it that we're doing that's contrary to God's desires and His will. Here it comes now. This one ought to shock you and scare you. You may have heard it at camp meeting if you were there this year. First Testimonies, page 199, second paragraph. She says, I was shown the awful fact that Satan and his angels, Satan and his angels have had more to do with the management of the property of God's professed people than the Lord has. Does that get your attention? What could we possibly be doing to give Satan and his angels more authority than God Himself? You want to know? Or do you want to go home now? I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you, so I'm going to tell you. Okay, here it comes. Not what I think, but this is from the pen of inspiration, Ellen White. This is from 4th Testimonies, page 482, 4th paragraph. Let it ever be kept in mind that the present selfish system, what kind of system? Selfish system of disposing of property is not God's plan, but man's device. Wow. Christians, she says, should be reformers and break up the present system, giving an entirely new aspect to the formation of wills. The last will and testament. That's what she's talking about. Let the idea ever be present that it is the Lord's property which you are handling. The will of God in this matter, she says, is law. Another quote here, this one's from 3rd Testimonies, and you're going to see how it gets a little closer to home now. 3rd Testimonies, page 121, 3rd paragraph. Fathers, and she could say mothers here as well too, fathers who selfishly retain their means to enrich their children and who do not see the wants or needs of God's cause and relieve them make a terrible mistake. What kind? Terrible. The children whom they think to bless, isn't that why you give it to them? With their monies, they think they're going to bless them. The children are, anybody know what the word is? Oh, somebody's done some reading. They're cursed with it. I don't want to curse my child. I don't think you do either, but there's the quote. If you don't believe it, look it up, read it, make sure I got it accurately. But now there's the rest of the story. Are there exceptions where we're told when it's safe to leave to our family and our children? This one is from 3rd Testimonies, page 118, 3rd paragraph, and also the 4th. Parents should have great fear in entrusting children with the talents of means that God has placed in their hands, unless, here's the exceptions, but listen to the qualifications that qualify as an exception. Unless the parents have the surest evidence. What kind? Surest evidence that their children have a greater interest in, greater love for, and greater devotion to the cause of God than they themselves possess. And that the children will be more earnest and zealous in forwarding the work of God, and more benevolent in carrying forward the various enterprises connected with it. So, are there exceptions? Yes. Qualifications, and do they fit? That's between you and the Lord, and prayer. Prayer. I am going to, at this time, give some time to Bonnie And we're going to need you to, back in the sound system, I'll take this off, I think, and maybe you can shut me off, and I'll give it to her, and then we can get her hooked up. But she's going to tell us a little bit about what Ellen White has to say about the making of a will. Should we do it or shouldn't we? Is there a right way or is there a wrong way? Bonnie, here we go.
You're supposed to use the microphone, not this.
Thank you. Al said we were going to talk a little bit about wills and how wills should be done and how they should be completed, I guess. The first quote I have for you is from Adventist Home on page 397, and it says, wills should be made in a manner to stand the test of law. And now I know that when you hear law, you immediately think of lawyer, right? Do you know what somebody told me the other day? There are some people out there that just do not like lawyers. I don't understand. How many of you in the congregation this morning are DIYers, do-it-yourselfers? Do we have any do-it-yourselfers here this morning? If it's like my house, some of your projects turn out the way you expect them to turn out. Others have unexpected consequences to the project that was undertaken. So we read from Ellen White that I don't know whether it was the dislike of attorneys or our need to do it ourselves first, but in the early 1900s, many wills were written without regard to the requirements of law. In fact, only 1 in 10 wills were valid when the person who wrote the will died. They wrote them in good faith, but they did them themselves. And when the time came for the will to be acted upon, they were not in compliance with legal requirements. She talks about the institutions in the church that did not receive the funds that they were supposed to receive because people did it themselves. She said it was the wills that were drawn under competent legal advice that stood the test of law. So in Pennsylvania, what do we need to do to make sure we stand the test of law? In order to make a will, we need to be at least 18 years old. It needs to be in writing. Pennsylvania no longer recognizes oral wills. And it needs to be signed at the end of the document in front of 2 witnesses. That's the minimum to make your will good. Now this morning I started talking to you about God's plan, and he chatted about how we are the stewards, but he's the master. And God lends what we have to us. We're to manage it, and we're accountable for it. And we've talked about children, and we've heard a little bit of the counsel on where our funds are to go. May I suggest to you this morning there are things we need to provide for our children? The first thing we need to provide for our children is a Christian home that models God's love. Then we need to provide them with an example of a good work ethic. Teach them that it's honest to labor for a paycheck. Teach them the skills that will allow them to provide for themselves and the society in which they live. And we also need to provide for our children a good education, so they will be able to provide for themselves in the future. 3 Testimonies 1:22 tells us, it is better to assist your children to help themselves, much better than to leave them a large amount of money at your death. Children who are left to rely principally on their own exertions make better men and women and are better fitted for a practical life than those children who have depended upon their father's estate. So our job, parents, is to provide our foundation for our children, both spiritually and with skills they can use to provide for themselves as they serve the Lord. Let me tell you a story about one of my clients. I was in practice back in Pennsylvania a while ago. It's been, I guess, about 20 years since we left Pennsylvania, and Pastor Gibbs has kind of brought us back to home. My client came in, she had a will, and she wanted to redo it. She had 3 children, one of whom was mentally challenged, and she had just discovered that that child was going to need more in-depth and longer care than she had anticipated. So she wanted to make sure that her will reflected that. She was also a very, very supportive church member, not an Adventist, but very involved in her church, and wanted to make sure that there was a gift to her church and her will. We made many visits together. She made many drafts of her will. She had the big picture, her son, her church, but she was kind of unsettled about some of the smaller little things. And the smaller little things took her way longer to decide on than the big picture. But we finally got it done. It was ready to be signed. She was making an appointment to come back and sign the document. One morning, and shortly thereafter, I was getting dressed to go to the office. Now, I don't usually have the TV on hardly at all, and very seldom in the morning, but that morning I had the TV on as I was getting ready to go to the office. And you know how they come across with breaking news? And they give you little bites to kind of keep you hooked to the breaking news? And it was like, there's police activity in this town, and then I got to this street, and then I got to this address. And I'm listening, and the longer I'm listening, the more I realize they're honing in on, my client lives in that town. I have a client that lives on that street. Uh-oh, it's my client's house. She had been murdered by one of her children, not the mentally challenged one. Because she had taken so long over some little things which we could have fixed down the road, the big picture was lost. The will never got signed. The provisions she made for her mentally challenged child were not what she wanted. And her church didn't receive the gift that she wanted. So, if you're thinking about doing any kind of documents, please prayerfully consider what the Lord would have you do. And then, to borrow a line from Nancy Reagan, just do it. The will you do today may not be the will that you die with that will in force. You're going to do several of them between now and the time you die if Jesus doesn't come first. So don't let the little things keep you from dealing with the big picture. Did you know that in America the average estate plan is intestacy? Do you know what intestacy means? It means you've died without a will. And the current statistics show that approximately 60% of America dies without a will. So this morning, those of us sitting here are not going to be part of that statistic, correct? Oh. We're not going to be the people who die without a plan in place. As good stewards, we're going to take care of the things that God has entrusted to us. You've heard this morning, we can't abdicate your stewardship by pushing it off to someone else. Don't leave it to your kids to distribute. That's not God's plan. Lest you think this morning, those of you sitting out there with young children, that we're only speaking to the more mature members of the congregation. We're not. We're talking to the young people too. I had clients that would come into my office because their parents made them come in. And they would sit down and say, I don't need to be here. I don't need a will. I don't have anything but debt. I have a mortgage. I have a car payment. I have student loans. I have no money. I don't need a will. May I suggest to you, if you're a young person with children, you have some of the most precious assets you will ever have, your children. And you need to make preparation for your kids should something happen to you. You don't want the court appointing someone to care for your kids. When I was in practice, about 20 years ago, our court system, the probate court, had a rotating list of attorneys who would step in and be appointed as guardians for children. Now, that might be okay if I saw eye to eye and knew who you were and agreed with it, but I didn't know the people that we were being appointed to care for. So someone could be appointed to care for your children who doesn't see eye to eye, who doesn't have the same religious background, who doesn't have the same idea of how their children should be raised. So it's not just the mature members of the church, it's those of you with children as well. Let me tell you another story. Another client, it was another single mother. She also had 3 kids. Each child had a different father. The father was not in the picture for any of the children, and all 3 of these children were mentally challenged. She had a very close friend who lived with her and cared for her children while she worked for the New York City Transit Authority. My client was very clear of mind, but she was very sick in body and was not expected to live very long. And she came in to see what we could do about planning to care for her kids. We had multiple discussions about providing for her children. She had a home. She had 3 insurance policies, she told me. The home wasn't free and clear. It had a significant mortgage on it. And she wanted to leave everything to her friend. She knew her well. They had been living together for a long time. She had taken care of her children. She trusted her friend with everything. She trusted her to raise and care for her children after she would die. She had made her friend the beneficiary of her life insurance policies and her pension. The house had no equity. We talked about what would happen when she died, and if she left everything to her friend, that there was perhaps a moral obligation for her friend to use those funds to care for the children, but there was no legal obligation, because once those funds were given to her, they were hers. There was no legal obligation for her to care for the children. Well, after our discussion, she decided she was going to change the beneficiaries on the life insurance policy and most likely the pension as well, so that the estate would have some funds to help care for the children and pay for the house. After she died, we found out that she had only managed to change one of the 3 life insurance policies to benefit the estate. One went to her friend, and we found out that the 3rd one was never in effect because she had never paid any premiums on it. So here I am now. I have a grand total from the life insurance policies of $25,000 to care for 3 mentally challenged children and a house that's mortgaged to the hilt. Well, but wait, you say, hold on. She had a pension and she was going to change the beneficiary on that one too. Do you think that happened? In 1990s dollars, that pension was over $300,000. The friend got the money. What do you think the friend did with the money? She disappeared, leaving 3 mentally challenged children to go into foster care and the bank to repo the house. Later, we found out her friend was a cocaine addict, so I submit to you, we know where that money went. So when I say to you, be good stewards with the funds God has given you, choose carefully who manages your money and cares for your assets, and choose carefully who will care for your children if you're not there to do it. And if you're looking for some guidance on how to approach these issues, there's a wealth of information. In Volume 4 of the Testimonies, it's a chapter called Wills and Legacies, as well as information in Volume 3 of the Testimonies entitled Wealthy Parents. Now, Al's already said that some of you already feel that maybe we're meddling, maybe going somewhere as we shouldn't be going, because many people seem to feel that when we do this type of counseling or when we even broach the subject that we're meddling. Let me share with you Volume 4 of Testimonies, page 479. She says, many manifest a needless delicacy on this point. They feel that they're stepping on forbidden ground when they introduce the subject of property to the aged, to the invalid, in order to learn what disposition they want to make of it. But this duty is as sacred as the duty to preach the word. We're told that doing God's business, this is doing God's business just as sure as if they were preaching the word to you to save souls. A quick look at Luke 12:16, and because of time I won't read through it, I will just paraphrase it for you, but it's talking about the rich man whose barns were full and he had a bountiful harvest, so he decided that he needed to tear his barns down and build new ones to hold the harvest. And he sat back, admired everything that God had given him, but yet he placed the pride of what I own. Look at all of this. I can now eat, drink, and be merry for the rest of my life. He's not thinking about anybody else. He's just thinking about how successful he has been. The important part of this parable is when God says to him in verse 20, "Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided. Who's going to get all of the bounty that you own, is what he's saying. So our question this morning is, so who shall those things be which thou hast provided? Let me ask you a question. When you die, how much are you going to leave behind? Everything, all of it. So the question is not how much we're going to leave behind, because we are going to leave all of it behind unless Christ comes first. The question really is, what will happen to what you leave behind? Will it have a lasting influence for good, or will it be a negative influence? You know, there are basically 3 places to leave your assets when you die. Have you provided for your family, your minor children? Our resources and our choice of caregivers can have a lasting influence on our family for good, or maybe not so good. How can you benefit others through giving to your local church school, the academy, Laurel Lake, a ministry that you love, Pennsylvania Conference? Let me tell you a story about a woman named Osceola McCarty. She was born in 1908, and she lived in Mississippi. She lived with her grandmother and her aunt. And her grandmother had gone into the hospital. When her grandmother returned from the hospital, she was unable to walk. So Osceola dropped out of school to care for her grandmother. She never returned to school. She never married. She scrubbed laundry by hand on the scrub board. Now maybe on the History Channel you've seen the little metal washboards, right? That's what she did. She would go out early in the morning, light a fire underneath her wash pot. She would wash the clothes in boiling water and put them through 4 fresh water rinses. Someone in the 60s suggested to her she might want to try an automatic washer and an automatic dryer. She did 1 or 2 loads and went, you know what? Doesn't meet my standards. The washing machine didn't rinse them clean enough for her, and the dryer turned everything yellow. So she went right back to washing. So she would start the fire under her wash pot. She washed all day, load after load after load, and she hung them out on a 100-foot wash line. And when the clothes were dry, she started ironing, and she ironed until 11 o'clock every night. She started saving a few pennies here and there from every load of wash that she had done. And she was so young that when she gathered her pennies together, she stashed them in her doll buggy. And when her doll buggy wouldn't hold anymore, she pushed it down to the bank, and with the help of the people at the bank, she opened an account and deposited money for the rest of her life, a little bit from every load that she washed. She only made deposits. She never took any money out of what she had placed into the bank. And she said, when people asked her why she did that, she said, I was content. I was happy with what I had. At 87 years old, she left over $280,000 to the University of Southern Mississippi. She set up scholarship funds for worthy but needy children. This is a woman who never finished school, setting up a fund so that other people can be benefited and able to read, which she wasn't. She said, I'm proud of leaving something positive in this work, and my only regret is that I didn't have more to give. She had started every morning on her knees saying the Lord's Prayer, and she said, the more you serve the Lord, the more able you are to serve Him. What a tremendous gift that made a tremendous change in the lives of many young people. Think for a moment, how could that impact Pennsylvania Conference? Think about a gift like that. What could it do to our schools and our academies? Think about the change a gift like that could bring about in our young people, to be educated in an Adventist institution, to absorb the values of our faith. Think how many children then would be prepared to be spread across the world and even in Pennsylvania as missionaries. Think how many people could be impacted by the Adventist message and what a difference it would make in so many lives. And yes, there is a third place that your money can go. It's the United States Treasury. If you don't make plans correctly, the government can get some funds that you would probably rather have given to someone or some institution other than the government. And I can tell you, the government doesn't send thank you notes. So think about it, folks, pray about it. If you have a choice, and you do have a choice of leaving your resources to your family, your church, ministries that you love, or the U.S. government, I don't think it's a tough choice, do you? I don't. We're told to be wise stewards so that even after we die, we leave behind a legacy of faithfulness and obedience that will continue for generations or until the Lord comes. The officers of the Pennsylvania Conference strongly support the things we've been talking about this morning. In fact, they feel so strongly about these things that they want to help those of you who want to leave a gift in your estate planning documents to your local church school, Blue Mountain Academy, Laurel Lake, the camp, the conference, anything that's happening that strikes your heart in the Pennsylvania Conference. And for a limited time, the conference is providing these documents to you at absolutely no charge. So, you are all invited to join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll be having a seminar here. There's a sign-up sheet in the narthex if you'd be kind enough to kind of let us know that you're planning on coming. There's also a sign-up sheet there for those of you who'd like to make a time to meet one-on-one with us. I am licensed in Pennsylvania and 4 other states. So I'm more than happy to take some time, sit down, let's look at what we can do to help you accomplish what God is encouraging you to do. So today, as you go home, remember 2 Chronicles 20:20, which Al quoted to you this morning. Believe in the Lord your God, and you shall be established. Believe in his prophets, and you will succeed. And don't forget Luke 12:20. Whose shall these things be? Will you join me in singing a closing hymn this morning? It's number 100. Great is thy faithfulness. recognize till we look back and see how you've led us. Father, thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for the blessings. And please, we ask that you would help us to be as faithful to you as you have been to us. Now this morning as we leave your house, we ask you to go before us to prepare the way. Help us not to misrepresent you or to miss a contact that you've lined up for us. May we, through our lifestyles, our words, our actions, show others that we are in close walk with you. Thank you, Father, for all of the things you've given us, but we thank you most of all